Mike Duffy isn't the only story coming out of the Senate. I'm Brian Lilley with TheRebel.media. Despite all appearances, Mike Duffy, the former broadcaster turned senator, is not the only story coming out of the building behind me. Yep, that's the entranceway to the Red Chamber, the so-called chamber of second sober thought. According to reports, former Liberal Senator Rosemary Lucier-Cools has been asked by the Auditor General to account for about $100,000 worth of spending. And we all heard the reaction of Senator Nancy Ruth Jackman. That's her full name. She of the one that said she couldn't possibly be asked to eat cold Camembert and cheese or broken crackers on a flight. Why, she's got to pay for a breakfast, and that means you and I have to pay. But there's lots of other stories going on. The one that really sticks out, though, is Senator Mac Harb. He's also going to be facing trial for fraud and breach of trust. His total amount, $231,000. That's what he paid back to the Senate of Canada after buying a home about 100 kilometers from this very spot. Why'd he do that? Well, he bought it in 2003 after living in Ottawa for decades, after being an MP for the very riding this building sits in, Ottawa Centre. Now, he was appointed in 2003 and immediately bought a home up the Ottawa Valley in Cobden, Ontario. And he did that because then he could claim that as his secondary residence. See, Mike Duffy's on trial partly because of claiming Prince Edward Island as his primary residence, a place where he'd owned a home, a cottage, for years. Mac Harb never lived anywhere but Ottawa once he was an official with the Government of Canada, yet he claimed that his cottage, 103 kilometers away from Parliament Hill, was his primary residence. In 2011, he sold that one, bought a different one. Neighbors at both locations say they never saw him very much, that he didn't really use these residences, and yet we were reimbursing him for the cost and also reimbursing him for travel to Ottawa, where he actually lived, paying him per diems for his meals here at his primary home, that on top of his salary. So those are the allegations that Mac Harb is facing, yet he was able to retire before he was charged, meaning he gets to keep his pension. Canadian Taxpayers Federation estimates that to be $123,000 a year for the rest of his life. That is some payday. Now, as far as Mike Duffy not being eligible to sit in the Senate because he lived in Ottawa but was appointed for somewhere else, if that's the case, then that's something that affects both current sitting and former senators, whether appointed by Stephen Harper, like Carolyn Stewart-Olson, appointed as a senator for New Brunswick, even though she'd lived in Ottawa for years, or former Liberal Senator Joyce Fairbairn. She was a parliamentary reporter in the 1960s. In 1970, she joined Pierre Elliott Trudeau's office, and she worked in the PMO until 1984, and he appointed her to the Senate on her way out the door, appointed her as a senator for Alberta. Now, if Mike Duffy's not eligible, then she was likely not eligible. But this just shows you that this sort of thing has been going on for years. Does that mean it needs to continue going on? No. But what you're seeing, as I've been telling you, is a media frenzy around Duffy for a couple of reasons. One, he's conservative. Two, the settling of old scores. Duffy, unlike the other senators I've mentioned, well, he's known a lot of the reporters here. Some of them he got along with, some of them he didn't. I've known Duffy for years because of his work and my work as a journalist. We worked side by side in the hot room, the original parliamentary press gallery room. So some of this is schadenfreude. That's what's happening here. Some of it, though, does show that the rules are not being applied equally to all senators. If they were, there might be a few more people facing charges down at the Elgin Street Courthouse.